We've been going through the book of Judges. Just as a quick recap, Judges takes place in the Old Testament between Joshua and King Saul. So Joshua, he is the guy that leads them after Moses. So Moses goes down to Egypt, gets the Jews out. That's the book of Exodus. They come up. Moses sends 10 spies into Canaan. They go in. 8 come back and say, there's no way we can take this land. These people are giants. 2 of them say, we can do anything with the Lord. Those 2 are Caleb and Joshua. That irritates God that they don't trust him, that God has the power to do whatever God says he's going to do. So he makes them wander in the wilderness for 40 years while that whole generation dies off. Then Joshua and Caleb are able to come back. They lead the new generation in. They conquer. They do what God has put in front of them. Joshua dies, hands it off, and as the book of Judges says, the people did as they pleased because there was no leader over the top of them. So the book of Judges is kind of a roller coaster ride of this cycle. We are holy and devout. We get distracted by Baal and Asheroth, false gods, pagan gods. We descend into paganism and sin. God turns his back on us. We enter into subjugation of some foreign body, at which point then we cry out to God. God sends us a judge or a deliverer. That deliverer then does just that, delivers us from the foreign body, and then we come back to God, and then we go back up, and then we're going to be holy, and we're going to be devout until we get it distracted again. And so for 400 years, up and down, up and down, up and down, that's what we do. Now, when we started going through Judges, I told you that the judges, when they first start, are great examples of spiritual leadership. They're great examples of good people. And then as you go through the book, they get worse and worse and worse and worse as we go. Now, listen, I don't want to destroy somebody's bubble. I know people love Gideon. I know that when people preach about Gideon and talk about Gideon, for some of you, Gideon is the hero of your faith. But we have to stay true to the text. And so this morning, we're going to see some flaws in Gideon's armor, per se, that leads to a real train wreck. Because what doesn't make sense in our text today, I'll be real honest with you, I struggled with whether or not we should just skip to the next judge, right? Because we're going to talk about a guy named Abimelech. If you're looking for a name for your kid, don't call him that, because you will see not a good person. Plus, nobody wants to yell like out your back door, Abimelech, it's time for dinner. So all that to say, it's a weird placing in here that Abimelech is in this text. It's weird that it's like we're doing the judges, we're doing redemption, we're doing restoration, we're doing this thing. But in the middle of that then, we have this story about Abimelech. And why is that there? And what is the purpose of that? And what are we doing? I think God is going to make a pretty profound point that I hope we can grab onto today as we look at it. So let's jump into it. Now, we're going to jump in chapter 8 because up until this point with Gideon, remember, Gideon starts his life in a hole in the ground, hiding from the Midianites. God tells him he's going to use him to lead the Israelites to conquer the Midianites. And Gideon's like, cool, but, I'm in this hole hiding because of the Midianites. So I'm whatever. So there's a series of things that go on. You can catch those old messages online. You can find us on Facebook. You can look us up on YouTube and see what you missed. Essentially, Gideon struggles both in himself, thinking that he's good enough and worthy to be the leader God says he is, and he struggles in believing that what God said he's capable of doing, that God can do. But we saw last week, Gideon does do what God asks. So Gideon tears down the altars to Baal and Asheroth. Gideon gets his army together. God takes the army from 32,000 down to 300 men. 300 men versus 135,000 Midianites, and they win. When we ended last week, I told you that Gideon chases the kings down, right? And he finds so they kill the Midianite king. The king has 4 sons. Gideon chases those 4 sons down, ends up killing all of them. And then we get to the end here of our verses. Now, here's what happens. This is verse 22. The men of Israel said to Gideon, chapter 8, rule over us, you and your son and your grandsons also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. Sounds good so far. Sounds like, okay, he gets it. That's what Gideon didn't do this. The Lord did it. That's how we live our lives. We don't save ourselves. Christ saves us. We don't put ourselves in a position of authority. But then verse 24, Gideon said to them, let me make a request for you. Every one of you give me the earring from his spoil. For they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. And they answered, we will willingly give them. They spread a cloak, and every man threw it in the earring of his spoil. The weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, or between 40 and 45 pounds. Beside the crescent ornaments and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, and beside the collars that were around the necks of their camels, Gideon made an ephod of it and put it in his city in Ophrah, not Oprah, make sure we clarify. And all of Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and lived in his own house. Now Gideon had 70 sons, his own offspring, for he had many wives. And his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, and he called his name Abimelech. So let's just clarify here so that we understand what all of this boring text means. Here's what essentially happens. Gideon does the conquering. The people come to Gideon and go, you should be our king because you've got us out of the Midianites. And Gideon knows he didn't do it. God did. When this thing started, Gideon's in a hole in the ground. So he's like, I didn't do it. God did it. But then from that, we go on to Gideon's life, and then Gideon doesn't live that out. The first thing he says is like, you should pay me a tax. You should give me the earring. Now, if you're sitting there going, what? This is a strange thing. Why don't I know about this? Well, here's the deal. The Ishmaelites wore a crescent on their ear to signify they worshiped the moon. That god was named Allah. So now you know. If you bring that up in certain circles, people get really frustrated, and they're like, that's not our history, but it is. So they wore that to signify that. So then Gideon says, give me all of those earrings. So you got 135,000 men. That's 135,000 earrings. That's a lot of earrings, right? So you got 44 pounds of earrings. Then he melts down and makes an ephod. And if you're like, what's an ephod? I didn't know either. You're not weird. An ephod is a vest that the high priest wore when we get to that spot once they build the temple. Okay? And then there's like there's the unum and the punum and the guluga bajudulum. There's all these weird things that go in the vest. Right? I know. You read it and you're like, this is very Hebrew. And then if you read commentaries about the Hebrew vest, people just make stuff up. We have no idea what any of that is, but people will be like, it's the essence. You're like, nobody knows. This ephod, though, seems to cause all kinds of problems. And then, the author here, he loves to use the word hoard after. So so Israel is worshiping this vest instead of worshiping God. It creates all kinds of, so if you're following along, Gideon, I don't want to be the king, but I want you to pay me a tax like I'm a king. I'm going to wear gold clothes like I'm a king. I'm going to take the kingly robes that the Midianites had. I'm going to wear those around. And then I'm going to take a bunch of wives like a king. And on top of all of that, I'm going to have side pieces all over the country that I'm going to have children with also who are not Israeli. We are not talking about staying in our line like we're supposed to so that it's God's chosen people. Like the people in Shechem, they're not Jewish. So it's bad news bears by the time that we get down there. Now, here is, my notes went crazy. Here is what is going on. In Shechem, you have all of this Jewish history. So just as a quick I know today you're like, what did I wander into? Well, jewishhistory.com. Welcome to Vintage. Here you go. Shechem is the city, if you remember when we went through Genesis forever ago, that's the city that Jacob goes to with his guys, and he says to the men in Shechem, hey, you got two choices. Either you let us go to war and conquer you, which they were good at doing, or all of your men be circumcised, and then we won't attack you. So if you don't know what that is, ask your mom. But what happens is the men in Shechem are like, well, we'll be circumcised because we don't want to get conquered, so that's what we'll do. So then after they're all circumcised, then what happens is Jacob and the boys wait till they're all laid up and in pain and hurting from the procedure that has been performed upon them. And Jacob and his men descend upon the city and conquer all of them. So by the time we get to this spot, what scholars think has happened is because it was such an egregious act by Jacob, the Canaanites have been allowed to stay in Shechem. So you have this city then that exists, it's 40 miles north of Jerusalem, that has a real pagan bent because of Jacob's fall all those years ago. So in the midst of that then, you've got, this is the spot that Gideon wanders into and finds this pagan woman and has this son out of wedlock named Abimelech. Now Abimelech, his name means son of the king. So if Gideon's not declared himself the king. Abimelech thinks he is, right? So they name the kid son of a king. Now, it also is interesting that Gideon would take the child who isn't Jewish and use him to say, I'm a king. Some scholars think Gideon's doing that because he knows he can get away with it. He's not near hometown. It's not like nowadays where the internet blows everything up and you have no secrets. This is a ways away, right? So, hey, I don't care, name the kid Abimelech. Nobody's ever going to know about him anyway. But what we will see is Gideon's pride and Gideon's poor leadership creates real destruction and real problem in the people of Israel. It is important to remember that how the enemy of this world is going to work is the number one thing he does to Christian people is trip you up with pride. This is not a message today that is aimed necessarily at those of you who don't know Jesus is. If you don't know who Jesus is, buckle in, we'll get there. But if you do know Jesus is, wake up and pay attention, because this is a warning to all of us. Because here's what happens. When you come out of darkness, and when you come out of the hole in the ground like Gideon, and God sets you right, and God puts you into a place of leadership, and God entrusts you with something, the temptation can be that you start to believe your own press and think you're hot garbage. Look what I did. I built this church. Look how great I am. Look what I accomplished. Everybody should follow after me. I'm going to write a commentary with my name on it. Look how important. You didn't do nothing. The only reason you're there is because God showed you grace, just like he's going to show to the people that you teach the gospel to them grace. And guess what? If you preach the gospel of Pat ain't saving no one. Right? You're not here to follow after me. Lord help you if you are. We need to have a conversation, because this is a train wreck. Christ uses broken things to prove how great he is, in that he can accomplish great things with broken people. And when you decide, like Gideon, that I'm special and I'm important and I should be treated that way, all you do is create a mess. Now, here's what happens. Remember, all of these children he has, they've watched Gideon rule that way. They've watched Gideon walk around and act like he's important. They know there's 70 brothers, right? We have 70 sons. We don't know about the women. Patriarch society, they don't tell us. This dude's got kids everywhere. Like, if you're coming up as his kid, you're like, Daddy is never around, right? Like, and then if he is around, it's weird, and he also has a penchant for killing anybody who disagrees with him. He's ruling with power and violence. It seems to be sex-driven. He's with pagan women like he's not supposed to be. Like, there's no example for these kids. So then what happens is, when you jump into chapter 9, Abimelech has grown up, right? He's grown up, and he's living in Shechem. He is the son of a concubine, not a wife, right? Concubines were like property, and they were used as men would use women inappropriately. If you don't know what that is, ask your mom when you get home. Now, you have this child out of wedlock, not Jewish, would not have been accepted by Jewish people. Here's what goes on. Verse 2. Say in the ears of all the leaders of Shechem, which is better for you? That all 70 of the sons of Jerusalem rule over you, or that one rule over you? Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh. That's Abimelech talking to the leaders in Shechem. The word for leader there is Baal. Baal is, of course, the god that we've talked about before. Baal and Asheroth. Baal means Lord. So these guys are pagan men. These pagan men say to Abimelech, you could be the guy. You could be Gideon. Right? So if Gideon puts himself in a position of authority that's not God ordained, and he declares himself king, then what that says to everybody around him is that is a position that any man can have if he has the power and authority to attain it. This isn't a God-ordained position. This isn't a God-respected position. This is a position that anybody can get their hands on if they can manipulate and control it enough to do it. So then the voices in Shechem, they're like, hey, you could be the guy. So they say, hey, go down there and tell him, what would you rather have? Would you rather have the sons of Jerubbaal? Now remember, Jerubbaal comes from when Gideon tore down the altars of Baal, and his dad said, we're not going to kill him. We're just going to call him Jerubbaal because he has a fight with Baal. Because he stood, so they're now calling Gideon by his pagan name. They're not even calling him Gideon anymore. And if you will notice, when you read all of chapter 9, guess who's never mentioned one time? Yahweh. No mention of God anywhere in this mess. God has hung up and gone, oh, we went down the roller coaster quicker than I thought we were going to. So Abimelech's like, hey, would you rather have that or this? Would you rather have me? Because remember, I'm from Shechem. I'm pagan like you are. So I could do that. We could do that. And so the men say, sure, let's do it. Now they give him 70 pieces of silver as a tribute to say. Now there's a reason for that. He's got how many brothers? 70. 1 piece of silver for every brother. And as you will see, it's not going to go well. Now the Bible is hilarious here when you're reading through it. We're going to skip it today, but he takes those 70 pieces of silver and he goes and hires an army, at which the Bible describes them this way: useless and heinous. and Abimelech took his money and he went and hired an army that was useless and heinous. You have to be aware of who you're around. See, pride will put you in a position that you can't listen to anybody. Pride will make it where you think you've got it figured out and nobody can talk to you. Do you know how many services in my life I've preached through Bible, I've preached gospel, and I've watched somebody with a hard heart sit, and you can see it all over them, that they're mad and frustrated that somebody's confronting them about their garbage they're going through. You're not going to tell me how to live, you fat, bald idiot. I'm going to do whatever I want. That's sin. That's sin. That's pride. And that's the enemy, because the enemy knows if you believe your own press that you've got it all figured out, then you're never going to know the truth of the matter that you don't. And then what happens is the enemy will keep people from you and around you who could speak into your life to say, hey, stupid, these people you're running around with are useless and heinous. Listen, if you take 70 men and they're all useless and heinous, and then you go hang out in them, what are you? There is a difference between God has called me to reach a people and I am those people. You got to be aware, and there has to be a point in your spiritual maturity that you go, you know what, I'm not at a place right now that I can save these people that I'm in, and the best thing I can do is to remove myself from them because they are going to put me in a place that is never going to be beneficial. And then when God fixes you, restores you, then you can go back and be that person to them. But until then, you got to put those people away. Now, he doesn't do that. He, on the other hand, he does this. Verse 5, he went to his father's house at Ophrah, and he killed his brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal. 70 men on one stone. Beheads all of them. But Jotam, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, and he hid himself. And all the leaders of Shechem came together, and all Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech king by the oak of the pillar at Shechem. Gideon said he wasn't king, but actually acted like he was. Abimelech just takes the mantle and goes, now I'm king. And to prove it, I'm going to kill anybody who thinks that they have rights to it. That's not new in the Bible. It happens all the time. Herod did it, killed a bunch of his kids, brothers, just brutal. I'm going to be the king. I'm going to kill all these people who think they get to be the king. Except he misses one. The problem, though, is they're supposed to be the Jewish people that God leads. They don't need a king. God's supposed to be over the top of them. So now you've got this brutal dictator psycho with useless and heinous following him around who's killing anybody who can object to it. What's funny then is Jotam, he doesn't keep his mouth shut, and he's going to come and preach the first parable in the Bible, the parable like Jesus said. It's the first time we have one mentioned. Here's what he says, picking up in verse 7. When it was told to Jotam, he went and stood on top of Mount Gerizim, and he cried aloud and said to them, listen to me, you leaders of Shechem, that God may listen to you. The trees once went out to anoint a king over them, and they said to the olive tree, reign over us. The olive tree, Gideon. But the olive tree said to them, shall I leave my abundance by which gods and men are honored and go hold sway over the trees? So then the trees said to the fig trees, you come reign over us. The fig trees, Gideon's sons. Remember when we started in verse 8, we want you to rule, we want your sons to rule, and we want your grandsons to rule. So Jotam's running through them. said to the fig tree, you come reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, shall I leave my sweetness and my good fruit and hold sway over trees? So then the tree said to the vine, that's the grandsons, you come reign over us. But the vine said to them, shall I leave my wine that cheers God and men and go hold sway over the trees? Then all the trees said to the bramble, you come reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, if in good faith you're anointing me king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. So who's the bramble? Abimelech. What is a bramble? It's a thorn bush. You know what they used thorn bushes for in that time? To start fires. That was the only thing they were used for. That and to be annoying. So when it says here, when he says, hey, if this was good faith, you anointed him king, and that's what God, then God bless you and let that work. But if it's not, then let the bramble be the bramble. If that thing is not what God wants it to be, then what that thing is going to do is breed destruction. Man, there's a message there for you. It doesn't matter what your intentions are. It doesn't matter what your thought processes are. Even if you go, I had good intentions, I thought this would be okay. If it's of the enemy, it breeds fire and destruction, and there's no way to turn that. A bramble starts fires, that's what it does. And no human being can change their destination. You are what you are. Only God can change you into a new thing. I cannot get out of bed and declare myself a figure skater. Right? I mean, I could jump up, I could shake Amy. Hey, babe, guess what? I'm quitting my job. I'm figure skating from here on out. Look at this thing. It's built for speed. And and you're all giggling and laughing. You're not hurting my feelings. I know this is not a figure skater's body. You've never turned on figure skater and go, oh, look, they're letting the 300-pound bald white guy out on the ice. Because that's not what I was made to do. It's not what I am. Now, here's the thing. I could wake up one day and God could turn me into a figure skater. I'd be annoyed. I would be like, for real? But he can do that. That's how God works. And so when he calls him out and when he says that, that's what he's saying. He's like, look, you've put a fire starter in a position of leadership. He's going to burn your house down. And that's going to be on you, not on them. This is a call of action to the men in Shechem to recognize what it is they've done. But we continue, right? That's just human nature. You can point out, hey, this guy that you've made a leader, this person that you're following after, that you have put into a position of godhood, is not a good leader, and we continue to march after him. They're the guy for me. No, they're not. You should follow Christ and Christ alone. If you're following a human being, you've been led astray. Humanism is a lie from the pit of hell. We are not the apex of creation in that we will figure it all out. Left to our own devices, we will breed destruction and death. That's what humans do. You need Jesus. He goes on. Verse 16, therefore, if you acted in good faith and integrity when you made Abimelech king, if you've dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house and have done to him as deeds deserved, my father fought for you. He risked his life. He delivered you from the hand of Midian. You've risen up against my father's house this day and have killed his son, 70 men on one stone, and have made Abimelech, the son of his female servant, king over the leaders of Shechem because he is your relative. If you've acted in good faith and integrity with Jerubbaal, with his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech and let him rejoice in you. It's bad. This thing's just it goes from war story. It's one of those stories that you read and you're just like, what in the world? And then, listen, I wish I could be like, and then Abimelech, he went out by a tree, and then the Spirit of God moved. And Abimelech was like, oh, I messed this thing up. We're going to repent, right? He's going to be the next judge. No. Now, here's what happens to our friend Abimelech. He gets to start a civil war. There's a dude named Gaal, because, cool names. Now, Gaal, the son of Ebed, says this in verse 28. Who is Abimelech? And who are we of Shechem that we should serve him? If he's not the son of Jerubbaal and is not Zebul his officer, we serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem. Why should we serve him? You've made a society that is built around power. It's the Machiavellian thought. It is a lie. power does not control, power corrupts. And when you set a system up where you say our leadership is determined by power, all you do is breed rebellion. Because the people underneath of you don't love you, they fear you. And every human being is wired at some point to face its transgressor. That's how we are put together. God put that in you. We have a deep thing inside of us that recognizes sin is our destroyer and we don't want to be destroyed. And so we are constantly seeking out the thing that will redeem us. And when somebody puts their position of authority over the top of us and says you will be subjugated and do what we want, there is a thing inside of every human being that goes, no, I won't. And I may tarry here for a while, and you may have the power, and I may be afraid of you, but I want you to know I'm working with everything I've got and everything that I am to figure out a way to get you out of the position that you're in. Which is why Gaal then stands in front of his brothers at Shechem and goes, why are we following this half-Jew when we follow Hamor? We should be following one of our own. It's civil war that starts to happen. And so, just like you would expect, Zebul goes down and tells Abimelech, hey, you got a problem up there in Shechem. Gaal's running his mouth. He says he's not afraid of you. He says he doesn't have to worry about you. He says that we shouldn't follow after you. We shouldn't do what you want. So Abimelech gets his army and goes down to Shechem. Who's running their mouth about me? This is sin on full display. This is sin unbridled. This is not sin behind the veil of pleasure or behind the veil of I don't want to offend anybody, behind the veil of tolerance. This is sin fully exposed. It is this prideful thing inside of me that says, I will crush anyone who opposes me. So when Abimelech goes down to Shechem, he doesn't go down and just kill Gaal. He goes down, puts his army in 4 pieces around the city and surrounds it. And Gaal, because he is a mouthy coward, runs. Except Abimelech doesn't chase him. Let him go. The problem is not Gaal to Abimelech. The problem is the people are not doing as he tells them to do. This is power and control. So what's he do? Rounds them all up and kills them. They hide in the tower. While they're hiding in the tower, this is twisted. Like, while they're hiding in the tower, he leaves some of his men in Shechem. He takes the other men 15 miles away to a forest and starts cutting down brushwood. Like, how angry do you have to be and frustrated and so consumed with your own hubris that you think my response, oh, you think you're going to be something? Get the boys. We're marching that way. We need wood. You make sure they don't come out of the tower. So he goes and gets a bunch of brushwood. They come back and they make bundles. They put it around the wood tower and set it on fire. Remember what Jotham said. If this isn't of God, then I hope you reap flame. Well, there it is. Who knew Jotham was being prophetic? And listen, you can get as mad as you want when people start to confront sin. You can get as frustrated, as angry. That pride can well up. Who are you? I'll do whatever I want. You're not going to tell me what to do. The wages of sin is death. You put it in the ground and it grows, you reap death. Period. And I don't care how you feel about it. That's what happens. If you plant tomato seeds in the ground, you don't grow bananas. No matter how much you wish it. You can stand out all day. Please be a banana. Please be a banana. It's a tomato. That's how it works. You put a fire starter as your leader, and then we're shocked when he burnt your town down. Now, here's what is interesting is Abimelech gets a taste for blood, and instead of him repenting, he just leans hard into sin, which is a message for all of us because that's what the enemy is going to do. Sin is built around a consumer mentality that there's never enough. If you got 1 Twinkie, you need 5. You got 5, you need 10. If you got 10, you need a truck. There's no end to what we can consume. I've done that. I need to do more. I need to experience more. So Abimelech conquers Shechem, kills all the people, burns the town down. After the town is burnt down, he collects salt and sprinkles it on the ground so nothing will grow there. What a happy guy. Then he goes, on we go to the next town. He marches right down to the road to the next town and starts to do the same thing. And what's funny is, it's like God goes, I've had enough. I've had enough. Verse 50 says, Abimelech went to Thebez and camped against Thebez and captured it. Now, there's a strong tower within the city, and all the men and women and all the leaders of the city fled to it and shut themselves in it. And they went up to the roof of the tower. Sound familiar? Well, Abimelech came to the tower, and with just so much pride, and he fought against it. He drew near to the door of the tower to burn it with fire, and a certain woman threw an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and crushed his skull. He called quickly to the young man, his armor bearer, and said to him, draw your sword and kill me, lest they say a woman did it. His young man thrust him through, and he died. The men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, and everybody departed to his home. God returned the evil of Abimelech when he committed against his father in killing his 70 brothers. God also made all the evil of the men of Shechem return on their heads, and upon them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Zerubbabel. So just so you're following along at home, Abimelech got hit in the head with a millstone. Now listen, if you're like, what's a millstone? So you put the wheat in the ground, you roll the rock. Okay, we're not talking about that giant rock. There's another millstone that they would use for leverage. So about 18 inches, probably 40 pounds. You will read later in the Bible that they are using Abimelech as warning when they lay siege to cities to not stand too close to the wall. Right? Like, don't be like Abimelech. The dum-dum got hit in the head by a chick because he stood too close to the wall. It's interesting that his sin was to remove the heads of all of his brother on a stone, and God removed his head with a stone. You reap what you sow. If you put death into the world, it will come back upon you. Look at history. That is the nature of history. When societies have descended into power it never ends well. Hitler killed himself and he died in a ditch covered in petrol and on fire. It doesn't end well. When we give ourselves over to sin, when we become the thing the world wants, it's destruction at the end. So what do we learn from this, right? So you get done with all of this and you look at it and you go, what am I supposed to take away from this weird story? Well, first off, you better think long and hard about who you're following. Especially in our world where we have made politics God. None of them, and if I offend you this morning, don't tell my wife. None of them are the example of Jesus. None of them. They're all flawed people who have fallen short of the glory of God, that are driven by their own ambition and their own desire to be something. What happens with the country and what they want is a side product to that. By all means, pray for your leadership. By all means, vote how your heart says to vote. But don't vote and think that you're voting for Jesus, because you're not. And here's the other thing. The leadership that exists is the leadership that God allows to exist. The Bible says that. God puts into power who he wants in power, and he takes out of power who he wants out of power. He let Abimelech lead for a minute, and then he hit Abimelech in the head with a rock. Because that's how God works. So as Christians, we shouldn't freak out and worry, well, what if, what happens, what if? No, he's got history in his hand. He wrote the whole thing from the beginning. The Bible says from the beginning of the foundations of the earth, he knew you, and he was going to call you and use you. So you're really going to worry about like who's this or who's that? We don't follow after those around us. Our leadership needs to be a reflection of Jesus. So if you look at somebody and go, that's who's going to lead, that's who I'm going to follow, they better look and act like Christ. Meaning then they better be very humble and very contrite and very aware that they're here to serve you like Jesus served his church. What else do you take from this? There's consequence for sin. If you live like an idiot, you'll die like one. Jesus said that when they come to arrest him in the garden. Peter cuts the ear off of Malchus. He turns and says to Peter, knock it off. Those who live by the sword, what? Die by it. Things just escalate. That's the nature of sin. And it's all just to lead you to death. Now listen, we could end the message that way. Right? You could have one of those hard Pat Edrington messages where you walk out and go, well, I feel like garbage. I'm going to go home and eat something. Except that's not the story of the Bible. See, there is a real liberating thing inside of this and in part of this, that even though Abimelech is a part of the Jewish people, even though that's in their history, we're here today for this reason. In spite of their brokenness and in spite of their sin, God didn't give up on them. This is chapter 9. This is not the end of Judges. There's another deliverer coming. So you may be sitting there this morning and think, I've done something so heinous and so terrible. I'm so far away from what everybody thinks Christians are supposed to be. There's no way God would ever redeem me. And what I'm telling you is, we just read a story about a people that put a king in charge who murdered all of his brothers, locked women and children in a tower and set it on fire while the people stood around and did nothing about it, marched to another town to do it. Then when he died, they all just went home and nobody said boo about it. And in the midst of that, God still saw fit to send another Redeemer to restore these people. You are never lost. You are never gone so far away that God can't grab a hold of you. He did not die on the cross with a condition. He died so all men and all women could live. The choice is yours. Either you follow death or you follow life. And there's only one life to follow, and that's Jesus Christ, who saw fit to say that no matter how broken you've been, no matter how far gone you've been, no matter how lost you've been, I don't care about what Abimelech did. What I care about is, in the midst of your darkness and in the midst of your storm, will you recognize that I died and resurrected for the forgiveness of sin? And will you come back to that cross and ask for forgiveness? And if you do, I will restore you back to the glory I intended you to be. It's a powerful message to say, hey, look how train wrecked this thing got, and God still redeemed it. And you're sitting there worried that you drank too much last night, or you're sitting there worried that you've done too many sexual partners. Who cares? Jesus died and resurrected so you can live. If you don't like who you are, then don't be that person. So as we go now into worship, here's your opportunity this morning. There's a few people in the room this should have spoke to. If you're a Christian in this room and you've set in judgment over non-Christians because you think you've got it all figured out, you're just like Gideon and Abimelech. That's a pride problem you've got. You've forgotten where you've come from. You were once a dirty mess of a sinner that God saw fit to pull out of the mud and clean up. Let's remember what we came out of once in a while. So when sinners act like sinners, let's not, it's terrible, it's terrible. They're sinners that need Jesus. And instead of acting that way, it should be, how do we figure out to get into their life, to speak to them enough that they can understand who Jesus is for them? So if that's you, shame on you. Ask for forgiveness and repentance. For the rest of you, if you don't know who Jesus is, now you do. Jesus was, is, and will always be the living, breathing Son of God who came to earth fully man, who died and resurrected for the forgiveness of sin. He took the punishment of your sin upon himself so that you can live. You don't have to stand accountable for what you've done. He already did. So what he's asking you to do is to bring that garbage down, all that baggage you carried in with you, bring that thing down and leave it at an altar, leave it at the cross so that you can go and be what he wants you to be. Vintage Church is a church that is about restoration. We are not about restoration on just the outside. We're not here to make whitewashed tombs. What we want to see restored is your inside, who you are internally. We want you to understand how you were made and what you were made for, which is redemption and restoration. So as we go into worship this morning, let's be a church that practices that. We're going to take communion. Some of you, when you go back to take communion, you need to confess how broken you are. You need to say, I've been living like Abimelech. I've been thinking I'm the stuff and I've got it figured out and I can fix it. You can't, you won't, you're marching towards death. This is your opportunity to say, okay, Lord, here I am. This is it. This train wreck is yours. Help me fix it. Then when you take that communion, you eat that cracker, you drink that grape juice, that's a recognition that your life is no longer yours and it belongs to the God who became man, who died and lived. And then what you're going to do is, you're not going to just pray that prayer and go, now I'm going to just go be a wild maniac outside of here. You're going to walk out of here and you're going to figure out, okay, now it's time to turn around, and the hell that I've walked into, I'm going to follow those footsteps to walk out of. And Jesus is going to hold your hand and be alongside of you, and this church body is going to come alongside of you as representations of that, God, so that you don't have to stay subjugated to an Abimelech that's trying to set you on fire. So don't jump past it and be like, I just want to go eat fried chicken. Take a minute and think about what it is that you need to work on, because God wants to restore you and fix you, but you got to make the decision to do that. Let's be that church. Let's pray. Lord, I come to you this morning, and I pray for every person in this room. Lord, for us steeped in our faith, help us to not be prideful. Help us not to look at what you've done for us and think that somehow we should declare ourselves kings over our lives because you've done so much in front of who we are. Keep us humble. Use us to reach people who are lost in darkness. Lord, for those wayward sons and daughters that are wandering in the darkness today, Lord, I pray that you would be a light and a beacon to call them home. Lord, we pray that your cross would be louder than the voice of the enemy that says they don't have value and they don't have worth. Lord, I pray that you would send us people both today and throughout our time here on this corner. You would send us people who need to find the restoration and the redemption of the cross of Jesus Christ. Lord, let this be a church that is about restoration. Send us the broken and the lost, those that have followed after power, Lord, those that have tried to be something important. Lord, and then into those people, pour your love and your grace and your mercy. Let this be a place that people can finally let go of the baggage that they carry around with them every day. Reveal yourself to them, speak into their lives, challenge them, Lord, and then grow us into who it is you want us to be. Use us, Lord, to be a light in the dark. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
What a powerful message that was, everybody.